Oh, hi, Mike. It's Zach here from New Zealand.
Oh, how's it going?
Good. You always talk about New Zealand. I'm always like, I want to call him up, but yeah, you're never live when I'm around.
Well, it's like 2 p.m., 3 p.m. there. You should be around.
Wow. I work and do different things. It's 3:30 p.m. at the moment here, though.
Okay.
Yeah, so I thought, I'll give Mike a bit of a call up, because you always talk about the meth-contaminated houses in New Zealand and the situation here, and I thought I'd give you some kind of boots-on-the-ground information.
Please, let us know. Lay it out. Let's start off with...
Yeah, you go ahead, you tell me, and I'll commentate for you about what's happening. You tell me ask the question, go ahead.
Black mold, is it a theory, or is it a delusion, or is it a media hype, or is it really, really plaguing a lot of or homes in black mold? What's happening with black mold?
Okay, first I'll tell you, it is such a problem that we had a census earlier in the year, and they actually put a black mold question in the census to actually get a national kind of gauge of the problem. You know there's a problem when they're actually putting it in the census, okay? I don't know if a lot of your listeners and viewers know where New Zealand is, but we're below Australia. We're heading down towards Antarctica, you know. We're quite at the bottom of the earth, so it can get quite cold here in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, it can be quite nice in the summer too. But because a lot of our houses, I'd say that the vast majority of them don't have insulation, Mike, and we've got such terrible, winters here, we do have a huge mold problem. And we have a lot of children, thousands of them, Mike, thousands, being hospitalised every single winter with respiratory illnesses. It is an absolute national disgrace.
Wow. Absolutely.
It's a national disgrace. I mean, I'm in Christchurch. I have been in houses where there are mold problems. In the house I'm in at the moment, around the bath, there's actually rot. So I've actually got really good landlords, though, and they are coming in to address that. But I certainly know in Wellington, our capital city, I was actually looking at renting up there some years ago, and I was absolutely stunned by the amount of properties for rent where the walls were just covered in mold, and it was just shameless. It was people renting out these properties shamelessly, not even caring that there's mold on the ceiling or patches of mold on the walls. Mold in New Zealand is a very big problem. They have failed to insulate the properties in this country to the level where they need to be insulated to reflect our weather conditions.
Can I ask a question? Is it just like, do they have like an embargo or some sort of tariffs on insulation for New Zealand? Why aren't people buying insulation? It's not like they're buying gold plates, you know. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, well, in New Zealand, there's always been kind of a Southern man, hardcore kind of number 8 wire, give me a tin can and a rubber band and I'll cook you a Michelin-style dinner kind of mentality. But not having the right tools for the job is not something to be proud of. But beyond that, Mike, I think it's just the housing stock is so old. So any insulation that was in the houses has rotted out. And a lot of the houses are just old and they've got lots of gaps now. So maybe when they were brand new, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe even 100 years ago, some of these houses, some of them were that old, Mike, maybe back then they were fit for purpose. When you had maybe, fireplaces, in the olden days, maybe they'd have fireplaces heating the whole house and whatnot. But a lot of these houses are old, there's lots of gaps, they're not fit for purpose. Any insulation they did have has just rotted out. So, yeah, they just haven't built new homes to decent standards.
Wow. Okay, so meth testing. What's going on with meth testing? I guess landlords are asking the government to pay for the meth testing, or give us a breakdown on what's happening. Explain meth testing to our listeners, because every time I bring it up, they have no idea what I'm talking about, even though I've read 13 articles on it. Maybe break it down again.
Okay, well, it's a huge scandal, Mike, and you were on the money, but we've moved on beyond it now. What's been happening is there's been social housing in New Zealand, okay? So we've got Housing New Zealand. They're the government provider for social housing, okay? Now, the last government, obviously, we've got Jacinda Ardern. We've got a new Labour government in now that they were elected last year.
Yep.
But the last government, the national government, for whatever reason, they wanted to package up these state houses and sell them off, or just bulldoze them down. So we've got a housing crisis, but the national government thought it would be a genius idea to get rid of the social housing. And one of the ways they did this was saying, all these social houses are meth contaminated. And who was setting the meth standards? Well, the people setting the meth standards were the meth testing companies. So you can see the conflict of interest there, can't you? If you've got a meth testing company setting the meth standards. Now, what's happened is, say, for example, someone has smoked meth in a Housing New Zealand house. Under those standards, that house would be deemed contaminated. Now, smoking some meth in a house is not going to contaminate it to the point where you can't live in it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's more dangerous to live in a house where someone smoked cigarettes inside than smoked a bit of meth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what's come out now is that there have been hundreds of people, probably thousands of people, which have been kicked out of Housing New Zealand houses when they shouldn't have been. There have been landlords, private landlords, that have got these meth testing companies come in and said, sorry, your house is completely contaminated. You need to rip out the walls, rip up the carpet. That some private landlords have had to spend tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, bringing houses up to standard when there was no meth contamination problem whatsoever. It is so shocking, Mike, that the new Labour government, that we've actually got a science advisor. He has come in and said the last standards under the national government were an absolute rort, okay? And we are actually compensating hundreds of people that have been kicked out of Housing New Zealand houses. The most vulnerable people, Mike, in New Zealand have been kicked out of Housing New Zealand houses because the houses were supposedly contaminated.
Wow.
Their property, so they've had old ladies, old men who are in their 70s and 80s, they've had to throw out their couches, they've had to throw out their clothing, they've had to throw out their grandchildren's toys because they've supposedly been contaminated when it was completely untrue. Now, you do make a good point though, Mike, in the past. We call it P here in New Zealand, but we have a meth problem in New Zealand. A lot of people in New Zealand are on meth, okay? And there are houses which have obviously been used to cook meth. So, not only has there been fake contamination, there's been real contamination. And if you type into Google News, New Zealand P hysteria or meth hysteria, all this will come up. It is an absolute shocker.
Wow. I will look into it further and read more stories about it. And this conversation with you has actually shone a lot of light on what's really happening with that. Is Phil Tyford doing a good job? I mean, I've been reading some articles that they are moving ahead with affordable housing. Is Phil Tyford doing a good job there for you guys?
I love it how you pronounce that. Phil Twyford.
Yeah.
He's the Minister for Building and Housing, I believe.
Yeah.
We've got Kiwi Build. So this is a reaction to, obviously, the housing crisis in New Zealand. We have the highest homelessness rate in the OECD. So the OECD is obviously the rich countries. It's a French think tank. We top the chart of the highest homelessness in the OECD. Okay?
Wow. Yeah.
The population, we have more homelessness than America, Canada, Australia, Japan,
Yes.
you name it, we've got the highest homelessness. Phil Twyford, he wants to do Kiwi Build, but, I mean, these Kiwi Build homes, Mike, they're starting at $600,000, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And need at least a 20% deposit as a first home buyer here. So it really is just a subsidy for the children of the upper middle class.
Wow.
It's not, and there will be, we've got less social housing in New Zealand than we did in 1991 when there wasn't so much of a housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It has been the past 2 decades, perhaps even the past 30 years, before I was even born, Mike, that this housing crisis has been brewing.
Yeah.
It is absolute negligence by the New Zealand government. We have some terrible statistics. We've got terrible child abuse.
Yeah.
We've got terrible domestic violence. We've got terrible drug use in New Zealand. We've got, I mean, you name it, it is not as glamorous as people think. I mean, and it is so refreshing to have someone like you over the airwaves or over the internet, over the fibre, telling the truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, thanks for that. I mean, there's nothing to hide. I mean, this is what's happening, and I think this pattern is happening in every English-speaking country. And I think what's happening is because we are free markets, I think we're just selling out to the highest bidders, and that's how we're losing our shirts right now and working 2-3 jobs to try to keep up with the normal life.
I'm thinking of moving to Perth, Mike, because I mean, Australia's got its own housing issues, as you well know. But what you get for your money in Australia or other Western countries there in Canada, you're going to get a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, bang for your buck.
That you get in New Zealand.
The bang for your buck. You know when I show you guys houses in Mississippi and houses in Kentucky for $70,000?
It's a joke. What you get in New Zealand is an absolute joke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people will be better. I mean, the wages in New Zealand, minimum wage here is $16.50 an hour, okay? Mm-hmm. And most people aren't getting more than minimum wage, okay? It's not like Australia. If people move over to Australia from New Zealand, they realise, oh my goodness, I'm earning 30% more. The petrol, at the moment in New Zealand, I heard a lady call in from New Zealand a few weeks back. Petrol's gone up since then. You're looking at it $2.50 for a litre of petrol.
Oh.
Go over to Australia, you're looking at $1.60 a litre. So, I mean, you're getting 30% more. I mean, Australia has some of the biggest houses in the world. I mean, New Zealand is an absolute rort unless you're right up there in the top echelons. And even people earning over $100,000 in New Zealand are complaining they cannot afford to buy a house.
Yeah, of course. Remember that whole Silicon Valley thing I did where tech workers in Silicon Valley secretly live together, a huge a bunch of guys, because they can't afford to even pay rent on their own. And
that's what's happening about immigration as well. Per population, we've probably got, I would say, I haven't looked at this particular OECD figure, but I would suggest we've got one of the highest immigration rates in the world.
Wow.
So you've got a lot of, I mean, not trying to discriminate against anyone's culture or, anything like that. I mean, if someone wants to come to New Zealand and work hard and participate in our values, we'll embrace them. We're a very embracing people, us Kiwis. Mm-hmm. But we do have a lot of Malaysians and Indians and just poor workers from other countries coming into New Zealand, and they will live 4 to a house, 5 to a house. I mean, there are situations up in Auckland, our largest city, where there have been 10, 20, maybe even 30 people to a house.
Hold on. Do you remember that article I read for you guys a year and a half ago, 40 people to a house?
I do, Mike. I do remember that article. I don't know if that wouldn't be the norm, but, I mean, it's getting up there. And, I mean, when you pull back the covers, there's a lot of this going on, and there's a lot of exploitation of foreign workers in New Zealand as well. I would say every other week, but it's almost every other day we have a story about exploitation in New Zealand. Can you just hold there 1 second? I've got someone at the door.
Yeah.
Hold there. Oh, hello?
Yes?
Oh, is that for...
Flat 2? No.
No, it's not flat 2. Flat 2's down there.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, that was just a courier. He got the wrong flat.
Okay. So, okay, next question I'm going to ask you. People being put up in hotels, how much of that is true?
Absolutely true. Absolutely shocking as well. The government is buying motels, Mike. Not only are they putting people in motels, they're buying the motels. And under the last government, there were people with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of debt because their stay in the hotel was being funded by the government, but it was being charged to the person taking up that emergency accommodation, who were more often than not receiving a benefit, or you guys probably know that as as social services.
Wow.
So not only were they, on the bones of their asses, they were actually incurring thousands of dollars worth of debt. I'm not up with Labour, our current government. Our new government has changed that. But, yeah, I think you can spend maybe so many weeks in emergency accommodation, then you start incurring the cost of that. And, yeah, by the end of the year, the Labour government is removing letting fees. So whoop-de-doo for that one. But, yeah, accommodation is so scarce that, yes, the government is actually even buying motels to put people in.
Wow, I didn't know it was that extreme. I didn't know it was that
extreme. It is extreme, Mike. And, it is the media coverage does not do it justice to the actual situation.
Of course they're not going to tell you what's going on. That's not their job. Their job is to massage you, to tell you everything's okay. It's all rainbows and unicorns.
A lot of people are thinking of leaving New Zealand. I talk to a lot of people, and I think we're going to see a lot of traditional Kiwis, if you will, people which aren't new to the country, leaving the country next year. I think people have just had enough. They're sick of the low wages, they're sick of the high housing costs, they're sick of the appalling condition the houses are in. And it's just a case of speculators, and a lot of the speculators in New Zealand are just mum and dad investors. They just bidding each other, bidding the prices up, and then they realise, we've paid so much for these houses, we can't fix them up. We've got to pay rates and insurance and all these extras on top. The reason why the stock's not actually being improved is because people are simply paying too much money for the houses in New Zealand. We're talking about, the building code in New Zealand, I think houses have to be fit for maybe 40 or 50 years. I'm not quite sure if they've updated that or whatnot. But, a lot of the houses being rented out are, 40, 50, 60, as I say, 70, 80 years old. A lot of them need to be, in other countries that would have been bowled down and replaced eons ago. We've also got a lot of zoning restrictions, Mike.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. You can't build here, you can't build there. A lot of ticket clipping from the councils. We need to test the soil. We're going to charge you $30,000 for the sake of it, and even then you might not be able to build after you've paid all these consenting fees. We've got kind of like a duopoly of building materials. A lot of the building materials here are overpriced. And what's even compounding the issue, Mike, is the New Zealand dollar, like a lot of currencies around the world, it's dropping like a stone. About a year ago it was 75 cents against the US.
Yeah, it reached a high of 79 one time.
Yeah, we have one of the most volatile. Our currency doesn't collapse or anything. We've got one of the most traded currencies in the world. And we've only got a population of just shy of 5 million, and we've got the 10th most traded currency in the world. Okay, I've seen the New Zealand dollar almost on parity with the US dollar. And I've seen it as low when I was a kid, probably as low as about 50 cents. Right now it's about 64.5 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's gone down more than 10% in less than a year. So that's going to make importing building materials harder.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of problems going on in New Zealand. We've even got a problem with synthetic cannabis at the moment.
Oh, yes,
I mean,
yes.
We've got people dying on the street synthetic cannabis. I mean, New Zealand, we've had people screaming out to legalise cannabis in this country, Mike, for decades. I mean, cannabis in New Zealand grows prolifically. It is a very easy crop to cultivate in New Zealand. We're going to have a thriving medical hemp cannabis industry in this country, which will bring billions of dollars into New Zealand, especially with our clean, green New Zealand kind of image. We could be raking in the money, but the consecutive governments refuse to legalise it. But, I mean, synthetic cannabis, they decided to legalise that at one stage. Every single member of the New Zealand Parliament, bar one, voted to legalise synthetic cannabis. And then they said, oh, hold up, people are dying on the street, we better reverse that decision. And the person who voted against it was concerned about testing on animals.
Wow. So synthetic cannabis is death, is what it is. It's basically, I mean... the whole, that's a topic for Mike in the Night, but it's absolutely,
it just goes on in New Zealand, Mike. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, no, I want to have you on the show for those kind of topics too. I mean, it's phenomenal, like the synthetic cannabis, and didn't you guys have a bath salt epidemic there back like 5-6 years ago?
Maybe there were a couple of stories of people on bath salts, but it's not a huge thing in New Zealand.
Okay.
I'd say the main drug issues here are methamphetamine, so we call that P.
Yeah.
Synthetic cannabis has become a problem. There's a bit of alcoholism, and but a lot of people in New Zealand like using cannabis. Cannabis is a very popular herb or drug, if you want, in New Zealand, but they refuse to legalise it. I mean, it may be too late now, but I think a lot of this methamphetamine problems, a lot of the synthetic cannabis problems, they could have all been avoided had they just legalised cannabis.
Yep.
You know, decades ago when we've been screaming out, and they still refuse to do it. They say, oh, drugs are a health issue, not a criminal issue, yet they arrest people hand over fist for drugs, and they refuse to legalise cannabis. So they speak out of both sides of their mouth in this country. It is absolute political weakness over these particular issues, and it's and when you couple that with, people living on the streets. I mean, in my city here in Christchurch, in the South Island, I go to certain suburbs, and I have never seen so many people pushing trolleys. I go into town, and I see people outside shop fronts with cardboard signs. That is a new phenomenon in New Zealand. That is not normal.
Wow. Maybe you should go on the streets and do some video footage for us and upload it to YouTube, and I could play it here while we're talking. So
I'll have to do that for you one time. I don't really like going around filming the vulnerable.
No. But you're actually spreading the word, or maybe how do you say? Creating awareness is very important. I think knowing certain things is very important. I think us being in the know is so crucial. But the problem is, for the last, I think, 10 to 15 years, we've been out of the know for so much out of the know that we don't even know who to trust anymore.
Yeah, and it's just, it's possible to, I have high hopes for the Labour government, but, it's always that kind of neoliberalism kind of...
Mushy feelings, yeah, I know what you mean.
It's kind of, so I'll let you go, Mike.
No. Are you in a rush? Because I have a few articles here I want to go over with you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. The last question I want to ask you is, I know the laws in passing and reading right now in New Zealand to ban foreign buyers. Is that what do you see happening with that?
Okay. Well, as I say, we are a country of just shy of 5 million people. So we've opened up our economy, we had the country opened up to any foreign buyer that wanted to come and buy here. So we could not absorb that kind of buying, okay? And I mean, if you're a big country like America, fine, have some foreign buyers. But a smaller country like New Zealand, we're talking an island nation here, we couldn't absorb that much foreign money coming in.
Oh.
So the foreign buyer ban, I think it actually might have just come in. It's certainly coming in this year if it hasn't already come in. But that is stopping probably a lot of money coming in from China. But saying that, if you're an Australian, you can still buy in New Zealand. We do have a special relationship with them. Mm-hmm. And also, if you are a Singaporean, you can buy houses in New Zealand. So it's yet to be seen whether or not people use Singapore, as a gateway to buy New Zealand property.
Yeah.
But I definitely think when you've got a housing crisis, you've got thousands of people homeless, you obviously want to do everything you can to get the homes in the hands of New Zealanders or New Zealand proper than a speculator living in China who may or may not live in that property.
Okay, and wow.
Yeah, just for a side note, Mike, it's come out that we have had one of the lowest sales rates, I believe it was last month or the month before.
Yeah, I covered that. And prices are starting to trickle down.
Well, they say staying stable, but I mean, that's just another word for it. They might start coming down. But it just depends on if they can keep immigration coming in, I mean, if someone wants to pay $600,000 or $1 million for an old shitter, if you will, mm-hmm. And they can get, 8 people in that property paying the rent, then they can maybe justify that price. But a lot of people are, they're going, it's a really hollowing out of the economy. That's what's going to happen in the long run. It's not going to benefit anybody because all the smart people, it's going to be a brain drain over to Australia or the UK or over there to Canada. The smart people are going to look around. I mean, I'm looking around thinking, hey, do I want to stay in this situation where I'm paying big bucks to live in somewhere which isn't that great, or do I want to go over to somewhere like Perth and earn more money, have a better climate, and have somewhere nicer to live?
Yeah. And that's what's happening with the Great New Zealand Brain Drain. Maybe I'll have you on a Saturday show, Mike in the Night, and I want to cover the Great New Zealand Brain Drain, and we could maybe get some stories of nurses and doctors and plastic surgeons and people of important crucial.
Oh my gosh, Mike! Oh my gosh, we've had strikes. The nurses are revolting. The teachers are, they've been striking. They're saying we're not working for this money. The government is giving them pay offers right now. They have been on the streets with placards. Mm-hmm. The teachers have been on the streets with placards. They're saying pay us more money. They have been striking in New Zealand. The police are demanding more money. A lot of the government core employees are saying, pay us more money, we cannot afford to live in these cities any longer.
Right, that's what happened in Sydney. Sydney's garbage collection, police officers, nurses can't afford to live in Sydney, so they have to commute 1 to 2 hours. So what they did was they built a condo just for people that work in the government sector, because there's no way for them to commute every day. It's just out of control. And that's how bad it's gone.
Yeah. And this is what, sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but this is what Phil Twyford's Kiwi Build is. The idea of Kiwi Build is to get these police officers, these teachers, these nurses, who are actually earning, you'd think good money, actually into housing.
Yeah.
I mean, the hell with the rest of New Zealanders. I mean, if you're earning under $50,000, you ain't buying a house in New Zealand. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I will say one thing for our banks. I mean, we know the Australian banks, they've got some issues. A lot of our banks are owned by the Australian banks, like the ANZ, the ASB, Westpac, whatnot. But here in New Zealand, the banks have required speculators to pony up with a lot of money. It used to be if you wanted to buy a house, you had to front up with about 40% deposit if you were a speculator, or a first home buyer, you would have to pony up with 20%. Speculators, I think it's now down to 35%, and they're thinking about lowering that. But I mean, it wasn't, zero down payment. Like the banks did require a bit of a buffer there. So when these houses do come down in price, a lot of those deposits are going to be taken away from people.
Yes.
Make of that what you will. There's just so much going on, Mike.
Cranes. I want to ask you a crane question. If you go down to the bigger cities, like Welland, if you go to Auckland, if you go to some of the bigger cities, are you seeing a lot of cranes, a lot of projects going on?
Well, I'm in Christchurch, and we did have an earthquake here quite a few years back, and we're still rebuilding a lot from that.
Whoa.
Yes. In Auckland, there are cranes. They are trying to build up some of the skyscrapers. I can't speak to Wellington. I'd say yes and no. I know there is the crane count kind of indice, which they look at around the world. You would probably have to Google that. I haven't really been, when I've been away from Christchurch, I haven't really been counting the cranes as such. But there is definitely construction that is going on. It's just not keeping up with the immigration, and they're not lowering the immigration. So, when you're building less than 10,000 homes a year, and you're letting in, 70, 80,000, net immigrants a year, there's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so I got here a couple of articles that were posted today in your country. Foul water and whistling drought. Life inside New Zealand's emergency housing. So there's an article up here about foul water. What's going on? Do you know?
That could mean a lot of things. Keep going in the article.
It just basically says... Wow. Okay, I'm not going to read into this one because this is someone's story and it looks really depressing.
It was a situation that was publicised in New Zealand a while ago where someone was paying, I think it was like $500, $600, $700 for a house in Auckland, and they were getting mold throughout the house, and it was called if you type in swamp house, it'll come up. Swamp house New Zealand, and none of the drainage pipes were connected to the street. All the drainage was going under the house and creating like a stagnant pool of, I suppose, maybe even feces and just water and just grossness under their house. And they had to go to Radio New Zealand to actually get the council involved, and because the government in New Zealand is scared when the media does cover things. Things start getting done if the media puts a microscope on certain issues.
Okay, I'm looking at the article. Swamp House, family no longer forced to vacate property, raiding New Zealand. Family paying $520 a week for a third world swamp house, radio New Zealand. Wow. Let me get images of this. Holy crap!
I'm not at my computer, but I can just imagine what's coming up. So there you go. And that's cheap for Auckland. I mean, there are people living in just like derelict houses up there paying $700, $800. I mean, there are people living in garages paying hundreds of dollars for the privilege of living in a garage.
Holy, look at the mold on the side of the house.
Holy. Yeah, none of the pipes are connected.
Holy.
And the council said, if you don't sort this out, we're going to fine you big bucks. But that family has been evicted. I mean, obviously the landlord just said, get out. A lot of people, because the housing is so scarce in New Zealand, people are afraid to raise issues with the landlord. Because the landlord will say, oh, well, don't really want to fix it, paying big rates, paid too much for the house, my margins are thin, poor me. We'll just evict the tenant and get someone in that won't complain.
This is horrible. I'm looking at the insulation here at the bottom of this house. It looks like, when you buy a brand new TV and you get that foam? Well, they're throwing that up in there. That's what it looks like, that kind of foam. It's not even good for insulation purposes. It actually is good for capturing and holding onto moisture.
Well, Mike, I mean, that's probably new insulation they've put in. They're probably just putting that in now, They would have had no insulation before, before the media got involved. That's probably after the fixing up of the property.
Wow, look at the mold on the windows, man.
And there's no double glazing in New Zealand. I mean, everything's single glazed, I mean, we're talking about our winters are quite cold. I mean, I'm in Christchurch. Sometimes it snows here, okay? No double glazing. That's a luxury.
I mean, is this issue, like, I mean, do you guys have tariffs against this? Is it illegal to bring in double glazed windows in your country? Like, I'm not mad. Like, the rest of the English-speaking world, or the Commonwealth, or whatever you want to call it, at least is ahead when it comes to insulation, building on frost levels, proper foundation levels, proper mold checkups, proper inspections, routine inspections. The rest of the English-speaking world, I think, is up to date when it comes to, health risks in housing and a lot of tenant scrutiny with, landlord scrutiny with landlords, making sure they're not, and a lot of landlords getting sued when they don't keep up their end of the bargain. Why is New Zealand so far behind when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to housing? Why?
If you build a new house, Mike, or a new apartment, you'll probably get the double glazing. You have to have the insulation, okay? We've got some insulation standards coming in next year. All rental properties have to have insulation in the roof and under the floor where possible. As for the walls, well, that's not covered, but the new standards are coming in next year, 2019. I'm not quite sure what month, but all rental properties will be required to be insulated in the ceiling and underfloor where practical. And there are standards of what the insulation has to be like. There are standards of how close the insulation can be to bathroom fans and whatnot. And also, property managers are going to have to declare to tenants the state of the insulation in the property. And if they rent out a property which is not insulated, again, only in the ceiling and underfloor is required. If they rent out a property and it turns out that there is no insulation in that property, the tenant can then take them to what is called here in New Zealand the tenancy tribunal, and the tenant can be awarded and probably will be awarded $4,000.
Wow.
So we do have that standard coming in. Things are changing. It's just like I said, Mike, they haven't built enough houses. So there's no new, it's like, if you're rich and you've brought, land is so expensive in New Zealand, Mike, that if you buy a piece of land, you're not going to build a small 2-bedroom house on it. If you buy a piece of land in New Zealand, you're going to build a McMansion on it.
Right.
And the only people that can afford to build a McMansion are people with lots of money. So all the rental stock in New Zealand is just old houses which are decades old and are well past their use-by date, which are full of mould and whatnot. And because a lot of properties in New Zealand are owned by mum and dad investors who keep outbidding each other, no work's been done on them. We don't have a situation in New Zealand where we have, I don't like things being owned by big corporations, but in other countries, you have corporations which come in and they will run, rental stock. We don't have that. All you have in New Zealand is these old, scummy houses that people are forced to rent for top dollar, which are well past their use-by date. The national government, their argument for bulldozing a lot of these old state houses, and bearing in mind, I told you we've got less state houses in 2018 than we did in 1991, and there's a housing crisis in 2018. But their excuse for bulldozing all these social houses was, they're not fit for purpose, we'll bulldoze them and build something new. Unfortunately, the something new hasn't come along.
No. And then it's been, that's when you, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about that. Yeah. Now... Yeah,
so does that kind of enlighten you as to the situation we've got? It's just, and they don't want to put the brakes on immigration because employers in New Zealand don't want to pay a fair wage here. They would rather import chefs from, they'd rather have people working in fast food who are from, India, or Malaysia, than pay some decent wage in New Zealand. They would rather, people pick kiwi fruit, and picking kiwi fruit, Mike, is a hard job, okay? They would rather pay, they'd rather get immigrants coming in to pick the kiwi fruit than upping, what they want to pay people. So employers, they're all for the immigration. Business is crying out for, we can't get the workers. Let us import workers. We need people in Queenstown to work the ski fields and whatnot. Come on, let us import workers. And the national government, the previous government, have been like, okay, we believe you. This new government, they're kind of a little bit more skeptical. They're like, well, have you tried upping what you pay people? Oh, no, we couldn't possibly do that.
Oh, God forbid somebody make a bit more money. Oh, my God.
It was so hilarious. Like, if you type, again, Radio New Zealand is very good for information. You should put that on your bookmarks.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put... There's a gentleman on there, older guy, that talks a lot of sense on there, too. I saw him. I forgot what his name was.
John Campbell?
Probably, yeah. And he's pretty...
He's moved on to another network, so, yeah.
Yeah. But he seems pretty upbeat on what's going on, too, so... but, yeah.
Yeah, I know of the kiwi fruit industry. Radio New Zealand did a segment on that, a couple of segments on that, actually. And they went to the, because they were saying, we don't have enough people to harvest our kiwi fruit. So John Campbell goes up there and he's like, okay, what's going on? I mean, how much are you paying these kiwi fruit workers? Oh, we're paying them minimum wage, $16.50. Oh, have you thought about upping what you pay people? Maybe you get more people applying for the jobs. Oh, no, if we up what we pay people, we're just going to take workers from someone else's business, and they'll be short.
Oh, really?
It was just like, jaw drop. Are you serious?
Oh, please! It's called competition.
Exactly. The whole industry needs to up what they're paying people, and a lot of people would rather just say, hey, you know what? I'll just go on unemployment. Live with 4 or 5 other people. A lot of people just have given up completely in New Zealand. I'm not saying everybody. I mean, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. But a lot of these drug problems are just people saying life is so difficult, they can't see any way forward. So they just turn to a lot of intoxicants to deal with the reality, which is the misery of their lives. And we have had, at the last elections, we did have a party called TOP, the Opportunity Party.
Yes.
And they had the real solutions, but the media really crowded them out.
Yeah, of course.
And it was so unfortunate. And it was so unfortunate they didn't quite make it in, but they are going to try running again. And in New Zealand we have coalition government, so Labour's in with New Zealand First, and they've got the Green Party as their support partners. So if a little party does get in, they can actually have quite a big say.
Well, we have to promote the other party that gets blacklisted that's actually there to help the people.
Yeah, and that was the Opportunities Party. And, I mean, to be fair, they did leave their run a little bit late, but it was actually funded by a multi-millionaire philanthropist, economist, and he was for, universal basic income. He was for, not like wholesale giving money away, but he had a lot of very, very good ideas that would work with the New Zealand ethos. And I could see very clearly where he was coming from and how having his voice in Parliament, because we call it the House of Representatives, because we need a variety of people to represent what's happening in the country. And he said, in New Zealand, the tax system is so geared towards housing because you pay no capital gains tax in New Zealand. You pay no stamp duty in New Zealand.
Wow.
It's a free-for-all. People are like, well, we could leave our money in the bank where we're getting, no interest whatsoever, which is why the New Zealand dollar's going down, because, the Reserve Bank has our official cash rate, I think, 1.5% or something, lower than the Americans' official cash rate, which is a first in New Zealand history. So that's why our dollar's plunging, is because, you know, and it's all because, we want to prop up the house. We can't have houses go down in price. We can't have interest rates go up, because if interest rates go up, people won't take out mortgages, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's very shocking, and people have been using housing in New Zealand as a vehicle to get wealthy. And then we're talking about maybe 15, 20 years ago, someone in Auckland buying $250,000 house, $300,000 house. Now they're a millionaire by just sitting on the ass.
And remember that articles I've been reading, or not even articles, that I've been preaching, that people are using their homes as ATM machines and living off the coattails of their homes?
Absolutely. Happens all the time. It's just, and people love it. And when they get into the voting booths and there's like, do I vote against my interest or do I vote for my interest? I mean, there are a lot of people in New Zealand that talk out both sides of their mouth. On one hand, it's like, there's a housing crisis in New Zealand, these poor, vulnerable people. But on the other side, it's like, don't want my house price to go down. They need to realise we are an island nation. If we can all do well, we can all get along. I mean, we can have a great our healthcare system is, you know, for all intents and purposes, you know,
I know.
You know, it's free. It's a good healthcare system, okay? Compared to like other countries, it's a good healthcare system. I mean, our education system used to be all right, but everything is starting to fall apart because of housing, because of lack of opportunities, because the cost of living is just not keeping up with the wages. And if things keep going the way they're going, it's going to cause even more social rifts in society. Mm-hmm. And things are going to get worse and worse and worse. So, you know, it's all very well to say, I've got my $1 million house, but you soon might be paying big bucks for your health care. Your children might be living in cars, you know? Mm-hmm. So people are so greedy, they've been blinded by the long-term effects of how the country is going. People can only see the ATM which is in front of them, and it's quite revolting.
It's disgusting, if you ask me. And they're taking care of their own interests, and nobody is basically looking at the next generation. And that's what keeps me up in a cold sweat at night, is the people not focusing on their next generation, and that's what's scary.
Anyway, Mike, I'll let you go because I've got a really sore throat. I need to have a cup of tea. I've just been screaming down the phone, so I'm sorry to your listeners.
It's okay. It's okay.
It just got me so wild up with what's happening in this country, Mike, and I just wanted to clarify a few things. But I could go on and on and on, as you could imagine. Well,
we'll definitely have you on again, for sure. And if you have any topics for Mike in the Night, let me know. If you want to maybe bring up the synthetic marijuana, or if you want to bring up, all kinds of stuff that's going on down there. Because whatever happens in your neck of the woods ends up happening in our neck of the woods, and what happens in our neck of the woods ends up happening in your neck of the woods. And that's the pattern that I've been seeing in all English-speaking countries that are free markets.
Awesome, Mike. Well, you have a good rest of your day, night, whatever the time is there.
Oh, it's night, yes.
Okay.
Bye. Bye, thank you.